Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special event, Finding Light Amid Darkness, with one of my favorite people, Rabbi Jill Berkson Zimmerman, who has really been a light for so many of us, especially this past month. So, first of all, welcome, everyone, and welcome, Rabbi Jill.
Thank you.
Yeah. So before we start talking, I just want to make sure that, just a little reminder to make sure you all have your chat buttons, your chat windows open on the right side, and feel free to send in questions as we go along. The first 2/3 of this hour will be conversation with Jill, and after that, we'll be taking your questions. And so, feel free to send them in. And then we're gonna play around with video and audio and try to get your faces out there when you're asking questions as well. Okay, so let's get started. Yes, tell me.
Yeah, deep breath. Deep breath.
Well,
yeah.
It's been that kind of time. Lots of deep breaths. Yes.
Yeah.
How are you?
First of all, I just want to say thank you for doing this, and thank you for asking that question. First of all, how are you? And I think that it is so important to be asking each other that question. I've been noticing, paying more attention to how I'm doing, and it changes every day. So there's some days I wake up and feel very hopeful, and the next day I'll wake up, or even later in that same day, I'm not so good. So I've been really trying to work my mindfulness practice of asking myself throughout the day this question that, in our sacred text that God asks Adam in the garden, which is Ayeka, where are you? Like, where are you now? So I'm happy right now. I'm so happy to be in this conversation.
Oh, well, I'm really happy to be in this conversation with you also. What you say reminds me of an experience I once had when I was in a meeting with this guy, a head of a Jewish organization in New York, and we were talking about, America, Israel, all these things, and it turns out he's half here, half there, and he has a daughter who lives in Tel Aviv. And he said his daughter has 3 little kids and a husband who serves in the army, and this was right after the 2014 war in Gaza, and she was alone for a month and a half without her husband, looking after 3 kids. And every time he would say to her, "How are you?" she'd say, "I'm fine, Dad. I'm fine. Everything's fine." So finally, he looked into her eye, he grabbed her by the shoulders, and he said, "How are you really?" And she burst out crying. And I'll never forget that. I use that with my kids sometimes too, to sort of like stop and say, "How are you really?"
Yeah.
So, tell us.
Elana, I just want to say to you before you go on is that I just noticed that a lot of people do not have their audio muted. So I think it's something that you can do from where you are to mute everyone's audio on entry.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. I'm doing it as we go also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. One at a time. Okay. Are you hearing noises?
Right now it's good.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about recent events. We'll start with the election, because that is probably the biggest collective trauma, or one of the biggest collective traumas. So what are you hearing from the people in your network about the impact of these elections?
I in my world, on the west coast in California, and in terms of my network, which is kind of all over the world, but especially in the United States, the people that I'm connected to are really traumatized. and it's actually started before the election, which is why I started that group. This group that we're in, getting through difficult times 11 days before the election, because there were so many bombshells that were going on. And what I can say is that I see that people are dealing with what's going on in very different ways. So there's like a continuum. There are some people who are completely obsessed with, waking up in the morning, going on social media, reading all the news, watching, et cetera, and posting, and kind of can't get off of feeding with information, and upset and feeling like I can't stop. I have to do to make an impact somewhere. And then other people are at the other end of the continuum, where there are some people I know who've just said, I can't deal with this at all. I'm going to turn everything off. I'm going to go. They've gone silent. It's kind of like, and I understand both sides of that. Many people are in the middle. But I do want to say in this conversation, because I think it's important that it's validated, is that since the election and since the kind of collective trauma in our community, and the divisions, people have been physically sick. So people with chronic illnesses have had flare-ups. People are having a hard time sleeping or eating or overeating. And so people's health has been affected. And I've noticed that, and I just want to say I'm aware that not everyone is in the same place. So there are some people who are, who voted for Trump and are happy about that. I still think that what we've never experienced before now in this way is this enormous division in our community. So we do have division in the Jewish community, and in the women's community there's division. And it was so much so that around Thanksgiving, there were huge conversations about what do I do at dinner? How do I talk to my father or my mom, whatever. So this is something that I think that there is still a good amount of trauma, and people are kind of trying to sort their way through.
Well, what do you tell people? Someone comes to you and says, my heart was with Hillary. I thought this was the start of something new for women, and
I know.
And then how do I go home to my Trump-leaning family where they're calling us sore losers? Do you tell them to go and have dinner and do the best you can? Or do you tell them to not, have dinner but don't talk politics? Or do you tell them to cut off and go someplace safe? What do you tell them?
So, first of all, I think every situation is different. And what I have been advising people is how important it is to have like home base, all right? Home base, a place that you feel safe. Number one, it's really important to be able to have a center inside yourself. And most often that is helped by having either a time of silence, whether it's meditation or a walk, but to really be in touch with a place inside about how you're feeling. So to check in with that, and to do whatever you need to do to be centered. So whether that's massage or, like I said, meditation or yoga or eating right, whatever that is, to have that place. And the other thing is that I think it's important to have friends that you can be totally open with and totally honest, and that you're going to be accepted no matter what you say or no matter what you, that they love you for who you are. And that builds a strength in ourselves, in a place of both in ourselves and also in a community that allows us, it strengthens us to be able to go into a situation and decide, what your stance is going to be. So some people, if you're some people at Thanksgiving, talk to their family beforehand, and that was a good decision. And then some people decided that we're just not going to go there. They're just not going to, and so I saw people navigating it in different ways. And so I don't think there's one right way, but I think it is important to be connected to your own self and to not abandon what the feelings are inside, and then to really be thoughtful before you go into a situation with, family or friends who feel differently. And then in the moment, some stuff comes up. I think this process is the same, is to check in, to breathe in, to tell yourself that you're okay. And then from a place of not a triggered, unthoughtful place, to kind of gather yourself, inside, and then make a decision about how you want to proceed.
It's so interesting you talking about friendships, because it really does seem like friendships now are more important than ever, from my perspective. I mean, and it sounds like you're validating what I'm saying, which is that now more than ever, we need these connections with people who we feel safe.
Yes.
Ourselves with. It's even more important now. Are you agree?
I agree so much with that. And, I posted something yesterday on my blog about spiritual friendships. And there's this, it's kind of different than, to me, there's a quality of a friend that really knows you, that knows your soul, that believes in you, that has your best interests at heart. I mean, we feel that. Not all friends are that quality. And I think this is a time in which it's important to kind of know who those friends are and to be able to be safe spaces for each other. Because one of the things I've found since the election, this has been amazing, is that I could be having the most, a very painful reaction to, I don't know, one of the cabinet appointments, and I'm very depressed. And then somehow, out of nowhere, I get a phone call from a friend who's in a different place and who lifts me up. I mean, this has been happening every single day, that there's this, where I know that I've been lifting other people up when they're down, and they lift me up when I'm down. That kind of sharing, that kind of friendship, I think it's never been so important. That's how I feel.
I feel the same way. With you also, I feel like had some of that this past month also. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we need each other's perspectives. So we need to be in conversation. I think that I'll tell you something, what I'm finding in social media conversations is that before the election, there were a lot of groups where people were gathering together to talk about different aspects of what was going on. And then there started to be groups after the election. I'm thinking of 3 groups I know that are on Facebook, of people who are as committed to the relationships that we're forming as to the issues that we're talking about. I think that is amazing. And the groups that have done that are the ones that are, I think, doing the best work right now. So there is a group that I'm in with people who are concerned about Aleppo. And it is really clear in that group that when you enter into a conversation in that group, it's on Facebook, that you're going to be listened to, respected. There's no arguing. That group is pretty much focused on taking action. But the leaders of that group have set a tone that says, this is how we're going to speak to each other in this group. And so that is very different than a group that has formed where there's a lot of debating and arguing. I am finding those kinds of conversations to be of enormous comfort, where there are some ground rules about civility and respect and compassion for each other.
So that goes to an issue that we've talked about a few times, about the relationship between spirituality and social action.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Could you share? Yeah. What can you share us your thoughts? What made you say wow?
Well, I feel like in a way, I feel like my life has changed. Okay. I mean, I used to do activism. I mean, since I was in high school, young, on the side, in a way. I mean, it was always been an important thing. And then when I made the decision to become a rabbi, and then decided that my rabbinate was going to focus in the area of mindfulness and Jewish mindfulness, I still kind of felt like, okay, I'm doing mindfulness and teaching, et cetera, and doing texts and teaching Judaism. And the activism was kind of separate, something like that. And now I feel like I am being called to merge those two things together in a way that I've never thought about before. I feel like we are in a completely new time. And it requires both of those things. It requires a level of connection and mindfulness and consciousness within ourselves. And that action has to come from that place. I don't think that's always been true in social justice movements or social action. And I think that now we have to merge those many different braids together. So one of the things I want to say that I really have felt about this time is that I'll say this about Hillary losing, that one of the big awarenesses of Hillary losing that I have felt is like, whoa, okay, now it's on us. It's on us. I thought that Hillary was going to be the first woman. We were going to have a new way of, we were going to have a different perspective of dealing with world problems and issues and equality, etc. And when she didn't win, it really came in on me that nobody is going to save us now, especially with the administration that's coming in. And I have to say that
Nobody's
I felt that
nobody's
going to save us. And so I felt it also on Friday when President Obama did his last press conference. I mean, I realized there's this part of me that I want someone to come in and fix this. All right. I wanted him to say, okay, we're going to do a recount and we're going to release all the documents, etc. And when he didn't say that, I felt again crushed. So I realized again, okay, he's not going to save us either. And so therefore, it's really on us. Like, we're the ones. There's that beautiful, I think it's maybe a Native American poem where it basically says, we are the change. We're the change that we've been waiting for. I can't remember exactly who said that. People have said it in different ways, but I think that's really true right now. And I think that we saw that in the Dakota pipeline situation where the people made a difference. And that was a very hopeful situation from that. So I think that everyday people, every one of us, has to take upon the mantle that it's us. It's on us. And I don't mean to say that it's on every one of us to save everyone or to do everything. That's not even healthy. But we have to decide which are the areas that we're going to take action in and also take care of ourselves at the same time. And that,
yeah, I want to point out that Russ has written in the chat, he said, we have the same experience of merging activism with spirituality. How do we take action from this place? I know we said we would do questions at the end, but that feels so right at what you're saying. Thank you, Russ.
well, I want to say that I think that it is really critical to have a spiritual practice. And that is, again, home base. So that, listen, I'm going to give personal example. I could easily wake up in the morning, check my phone, and I am off and running because there's something that is calling for my attention, some new petition, some new tragedy, okay? That's one way to wake up in the morning. It is a huge, that would probably be my way without thinking if I wasn't conscious. That's how I would wake up most mornings. Like, let me go. But I have to really remind myself, and I have to say sometimes, it's really a discipline to wake up and first fill my own cup. So wake up with gratitude. Don't turn on the phone. Don't turn on what has happened overnight. But just to start with a morning practice, and Judaism offers some incredible, simple practices about gratitude, about awareness of our bodies, and then to take the time to sit and be still and to meditate, to make sure that I eat before I turn on my computer. That's a discipline. And I think that whatever it is that your spiritual practice is, that has to be like the big rock. There's that thing about you put the big rocks in first, and then you can do more from that place. So one thing is having a spiritual practice, either first thing in the morning or when you go to bed at night. That's a whole other conversation about spiritual practice. And that is what, basically, yeah.
So first of all, we have someone who was asking Sharon if you can share some of those practices afterwards, and so the answer is, of course, we'll share that. Maybe we'll make a document or a video, or we'll do something. The other thing that I also just wanted to add to what you're saying is just that I've also been involved with a lot of social activism work, especially feminist work, for over 20 years, and my experience. The word that I kept thinking of when you were talking was balance. Before I rush into the world, I got to be balanced in myself, because I have a lot of experiences of working in organizations, Jewish organizations, feminist organizations, where there wasn't that. Where there was no group practice either. There was no organizational practice. There was no there was no communal practice or awareness of the need for that. And especially if we're doing the work of social activism, the work of feminism, I've found that most people who come to feminism come from a place of having experienced some painful things.
Yes.
People who come to feminism come to it from all kinds of stuff. And if we don't find a way to unpack that, or at least to have awareness about our own scars and the things that are maybe unconsciously driving us, then a lot of bad things can happen even in a group with goodwill.
Yes, I know. So that's the piece of so one piece is to have a spiritual practice. The next piece is to be connected to other people in which you have confidence that you are going to be heard and held in a way that is respectful. So I think that the heart is often left out of social action work, which is interesting because it comes from a place of let's do something good for other people, but then the conversations with each other are painful and there's criticism. And I think, no, the process has to match the goal. That means that we have to take the time to be compassionate with each other. And that's why I was moved that the first question you asked in this conversation is, how are you? That has to be the first thing. I mean, when I teach my classes, more the ones in person, is that we don't get into the content until we go around the room and say, how are you? Where are you? Like, I see you as a human being. So that has to be there. And if you, and I feel like it's not, I don't really have patience anymore to be in groups where that's not going to be. That requires a consciousness of group process and leadership in which compassion and listening is modeled. Not every leader knows how to do those things. So I think it's important to learn what those things are if you have your own groups, or to talk to other people about how to create safe spaces.
Right. Right. So
not a given.
So first of all, a couple of things. First of all, we also don't do that in schools. I just want to point out that I've written about this. You know, my background is education and sociology, so I've done a lot of research and writing about education. One of the things that I've really tried to speak out about is how we greet kids. Right? How do we? What's the first thing? Because so often, we send our kids to school, and the first thing that they hear from the teacher is, sit down, go to your seat, orders, barking, and these are things that people take with them. So I guess this brings me to another question, which is that, and I'm sorry, Heather, we'll come to your question in a bit. I don't want Heather to feel like, oh, I'm asking everybody except hers. We'll come back to yours in a second.
Yeah, okay.
But I just wanted to. Just to follow up on what you're saying, do you think that we're living in a new? That this is the start of a new era?
Yes.
And how is this new era characterized? Because you're suggesting that, the way you say, oh, I don't have any patience for any of that anymore. And I felt a lot of that too, but I haven't yet fully been able to articulate what it is that I'm leaving behind. But there is this sense of leaving certain things behind and having no more patience for that, and coming to new rules of engagement or something. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that we have to, I want to answer it by also connecting to something that you said about education. There's a wonderful woman named Rachel Kessler. Unfortunately, she died. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she was a real leader in education and in spiritual education. And basically, she talked about that people bring their souls into the room, and that has to be acknowledged. And like before, we were saying that way of thinking of our souls and our hearts was often put on the shelf when we're in an activist world, okay, because we have so much to do that's so important. Or we would go to retreats, spiritual retreats, and we would just be there in a place where our souls were accepted. We have to find ways right now in this new territory, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, not everyone agrees with this, but this is how I feel, is that we have to be merging all of that right now. We have to merge our own personal spiritual practice with community of a deep sense of respect and compassion, where the soul and the heart is acknowledged. And then we move together with people to make a difference in the world in whatever way we can. The world right now is overwhelming. There is so much need everywhere you look. And I think it's important that we, in a conscious, rather than a knee-jerk, there's an issue we need to move, is to be thoughtful about where am I going to put my energy? How am I going to proceed today? Am I going to be totally involved in Aleppo, and I'm not going to deal with issues in Israel or whatever, vice versa? Or am I going to do a little bit in different ways? I want to say one other thing. A friend of mine, Andrea Hodos in Los Angeles, wrote something fantastic several weeks ago, right after the election, which I agree with, which is like, what's your path? Find your path and do that. If you're a writer, write. If you're a singer, sing. If you are someone who gathers people together, do that, because everyone is needed. Some people are going to be more out there in front, and other people are very comfortable being, I'll be the worker bee, which is we're all needed, and all of our various skills are needed. Did I respond to you? Did I go off?
Well, just bringing it back, because I think that people want to hear, where do we go from here? And also, because the question that I asked you was, are we in a new era? Okay, and what is that? So what you're describing is a kind of like, it's almost a spiritual war. I mean, that might be too strong or too scary, but it feels like what you're describing is that we're gathering all of these resources and all these like spiritual warriors out there to fight for something that we didn't realize we had to fight so hard for. We weren't expecting this.
I know.
Right? That we were expecting that November 8th would have been a day that we kind of won something. And instead we lost something so terribly. And now all of us have to gather up our resources somehow and fight for this thing. But it's not just about social activism. It's about something so much deeper. So it's a core thing about what it means to be a human being. And how do we do that? Yeah.
Oh, wow. Listen, one of the things that has been a huge assault, and I want to acknowledge this before I respond exactly to what you were saying, Elana, which is that one of the big feelings of many people, including myself, is that the bully won, that hate won, that anti-Semitism won, that civility lost.
Misogyny won.
Yes, and the
rapist won.
The person who came on and bragged about how he treated women, that person won. And I think that for many of us, not only is that so emotionally triggering for any of us who've been around a bully or in any way, whether in our family of origin, in a relationship, at work situation, that I think we were so confident that we, the United States, we were going to show the bully that love was going to win. I mean, there was this, the hashtag, which I used over and over, love trumps hate. I think that, to me, is the deepest wound of this election. That even now, and that his winning emboldened this enormous hate to just pour out. I think that has to be confronted and dealt with, and we cannot give up I don't know, I don't like using war language, but I can't think of another word right now. We can't give up the fight for the divinity in each person. We just can't. So even if it's tempting to, on Twitter, I've been the subject of a lot of people's Twitter hate. And there is a knee-jerk, which is that someone writes me something anti-Semitic and I want to write that person back and engage. It's really wrong. I do not engage with them. And I don't also want to, I have a thing where I cannot be hateful to them like they're being hateful to me. That is not acceptable. But I do need a place at friends, community, where I can say, listen to what happened, and I'm in pain. This is really painful that I was added to 10 lists on Twitter today that I can't even believe that someone spent their time adding me to a group called Idiots. I was on Thursday added to a group on Twitter called Idiots. I mean, who does that? That, I didn't ignore it. I reported the person, I blocked them, etc. So I did take action. So I feel like we're in a time in which what we thought, like you said before, what we thought was going to win, finally it's our turn. Oh, that did not win. That did not win. But it doesn't mean that we lay over. It doesn't mean that we lay down and roll over, whatever.
Yeah, like Russ wrote, the spiritual warrior refrains rather than represses. That's interesting. So, but what do you do? So let's say you're in your congregation. There was a question here before about congregational leaders and other leaders. So let's say you're the leader of a congregation, and everything's nice and everybody's sweet and caring and doing their community thing, and suddenly emerges a bully. Someone who's spewing the hate, and whatever that hate is directed at, and we've seen so many iterations of that it could, and so it only takes one bully in the room to ruin it for everyone.
Okay, but here's the thing. This goes back to the ground rules for community. That has to be built so strongly that people agree and accept that this is how we're going to speak to each other. This is how we're going to treat each other. And I think that in that environment, when a bully bullies or whatever, it is not only the leaders who stand up and say that's not acceptable. It's what I said before. It's on all of us. Number one, I do think that we cannot bully back. On the other hand, there are certain things that are unacceptable. They're just unacceptable. I mean, when my kids were growing up and the way they would, like name calling, this is kind of what blows my mind, is that I wouldn't even let my kids call each other names. I would just say to them, we don't do that in this house. We don't call each other shaming names. We don't do that. I understand that you're angry. It's okay to be angry at your brother. It's not okay to speak this way to him.
Yeah, that's what Heather writes here. Heather writes, we all have to bear witness and call it out as being unacceptable.
Exactly.
This is where the battles are taking place in this, like, these everyday interactions.
Like one of the things I think would be really good is for every person to really write a code of conduct for your own self. What is the way that you want to operate in the world? How do you want to speak to each other in conversations? I mean, I'm sorry, I think most of the people who are in this call are people who are kind and compassionate. But I think that part of that code of conduct is like asking yourself before it happens. It's kind of like Thanksgiving. When someone speaks and in a Facebook conversation, when someone bullies someone else, what is my stance going to be? So that you think about that beforehand. Are you going to call it out? Do you feel responsible to call it out? Do you have a conversation? Is it okay to shame someone? Is it ever okay to shame someone? I mean, one of the things I noticed in Facebook is that in some Jewish conversations, and I can't believe how people speak to each other. This just is incredible. And often, if there's someone that I know, and I will, or even I don't know, I will private message the person rather than publicly shame them. Right. You know? So I think that
I think we have a problem in the Jewish community.
I
think we have a problem in the Jewish community in that kind of public shaming is acceptable. I mean, I'm just going to tell you my perspective as coming, I was in Orthodoxy for my first 40 years of life, and I was, and I've researched this and I've written about it, and, the shaming of women in Orthodoxy, right, where it's like acceptable for rabbis and teachers and anyone to shame a girl, say, you're dressed like this, and for rabbis to use their entire pulpits to talk about how these girls are dressed or how they're behaving and stuff like that. And my theory is that this creates that culture. It enables that culture. It's very distressing to me how many Orthodox Jews voted for Trump. I think, it sounds like I'm leaping. I'm sorry if I'm sounding like I'm leaping, but I really feel like all of these things are connected.
I do think it's connected. I mean, I'll tell you something that happened when I tweeted during Trump's immigration speech. That, I believe, was in October. Okay, I tweeted, and I basically tweeted the statements on the Statue of Liberty. I was tweeting about Jewish values of accepting the stranger. I mean, I was on a roll, and they were not negative to anyone. That was after that, I woke up to hundreds of anti-Semitic tweets. Hundreds. And all of them, I checked out the profiles of the people that tweeted me. All of them were Trump supporters. I ended up I reported them, etc. Then I wrote an article. And I wrote an article that was about the Twitter hate, and I talked about a couple different ways in terms of Jewish stories and Jewish values of how we need to see the divinity in each other. Anyway, that article was published by the Jewish Journal. When it was published by the Jewish Journal, I received the most horrible comments from the Jewish community on my article about the anti-Semitism that I received on Twitter. So I felt sandwiched in between and that, I have to say, hurt me even more than the anti-Semitism. Like, I don't know those people. They probably were bots anyway. That was one thing. But then from my own community, but look at, not my community in the semi, they were Jews. Many were, they went off on me on, you're not really a rabbi, I can't respect you, and stuff that was not even in my article, very pro-Trump, and that was painful. So it was my article was released around the high holidays. And I ended up feeling like there were certain people I totally ignored because they were, I just did. And then there were certain people that I felt I wanted to respond to them. I wanted to show another way of responding, and I responded to them with kindness and saying often something like, this is the high holidays. Is this really how you want to speak to me? Like, think about it. And hoping to engage in a different kind of conversation, which I'm sorry to say didn't happen. And I have to say that I don't have any answers.
Well, let me ask you
answers, but
here also, which I think is a really important question.
Okay.
Is there any way to stand up forcefully? And he goes, Cynthia writes this. I will admit sometimes it is my first instinct. It is often my first instinct and I've done and said really ineffective things. I've been really ineffective because you have that, you're being attacked with a kind of violence. Well, you experience violence. It's not physical violence, but it's most certainly violence.
So listen, I think that this is where spiritual practice and mindfulness is essential. So let's say you're in a conversation and someone says something and you instinctively, knee-jerk, want to respond in some way, I would say take a breath. Take 3 mindful breaths and step away from the computer and think about, like, give yourself the space to think about what's the best way to respond. Some people need to be reported, okay? I'm not saying turn the other cheek. I'm not saying ignore totally, but I am saying to be thoughtful about responding, to not accept the behavior. But there was something that happened the other day that someone wrote a post on Facebook and someone responded to them in a horrible way. And I, being who I am, I immediately wanted to tell that person, you can't speak that way to someone. I mean, I was going to do that. And then I realized, I took a breath and I realized that what part of me was responding I was going to save the woman. You know what I mean? That response in me. And I ended up not responding because I knew that the woman who had written the post originally could take care of herself. The person who responded to her, it was, you know what, it was one of those things where she said something and this person in her network writes, just get over it. You lost, just get over it. Well, like, that's like putting red before the bull to me. Like, I can't stand that people say, you know, get over it. But then I took a breath. I did not respond to the person. What?
The crybabies thing.
It was that kind of thing. And then I thought, I didn't respond. And I actually felt good about that. That I don't know the person who wrote that. My friend could take care of herself. She didn't need me to jump in and save her. I actually ended up writing my friend in a private message the next morning and told her my thoughts. So I wanted her to know that I was supportive of her. Anyway, it's important to take the quickness of social media and put some space in between it. A space in between what we feel like saying, taking a breath, and then responding.
I want to get back to where we started from, or one of the places we started from, which is about social activism. And you don't want to use war language, but this is the fight. Okay, we're in this sort of fight that we didn't know we were going to have to be in. Where would you recommend for the sort of feminist, progressive community to put communal energies, to put energies for social change? What do you want? What would you suggest people spend their time doing now?
Well, I think number one is, I know in terms of the Jewish community, there is a wonderful group that has formed on Facebook, led by these 2 young women, Lindsay and Emily, Lindsay O'Neill and Emily Shapiro. They have led this effort in the Jewish community of picking a few different issues. It started over the Bannon appointment, and then it moved to the Hanukkah party. They've had a number of different issues.
What's the name of the group?
It's, you know what, I can't remember the name of the group right now.
We'll send it out.
Yeah, I can send it out.
Okay.
I want to tell you what is so important to me about that group. They're in their 30s, these 2 young women, and the way they have conducted themselves is beautiful. They have, every single day they post, here are 3 things that you could do today. And they're all in the Jewish community. Here's the phone numbers. And they also, one of the efforts was about the Jewish Federation of North America. That's how I think the group started, not coming out against the Bannon appointment. And they arrange meetings with the president. Everyone was calling, there were petitions, etc. But their goal was to have a dialogue with, I think, Jerry Silverman, who's the head of the federations, the national head. And they would then come into the group and they'd report on their conversations. And actually, Jerry Silverman ended up making some changes and some moves. They did it with such a respectful manner that's one group I really am impressed about. The other group I'm really impressed about is the Stand with Aleppo group. These are everyday people, okay? I mean, these are just like the possibility, again, this is us. We have to take steps, is the Stand with the Aleppo group, where these two moms who really felt like they wanted to make a difference around the Aleppo issue. And they also have actions every day. There's so many people involved. The kindness is of each other is incredible. And there are Jews, Christians, Muslims, atheists, everyone is welcome. It's not a religious group. And I want to say that I think that this, in terms of action, I think this time is one in which we need to be paying as much attention to creating alliances as possible. So allies. One of the things that's come out of this election is that, I want to have deeper relationship with Muslim women, with Christian women of faith. And that we need to find the common ground. I mean, I'm not saying that interfaith work is new, but there's something about this that feels new to me, in that we are going to find ways to bond with each other in a deeper way and take action. Elana, before we're done, I wanted to share a story from our tradition that I think is helpful, but I know that there may be questions. Maybe I can save it for if we do this again. Okay.
So, there are a whole bunch of questions
okay.
coming in. So I want to get back to Heather's question, which I thought was really an important one from the beginning, when we were having that conversation about spirituality and social action. She said, how do we not let ourselves get diffused? Maybe.
Oh yeah, great question.
Do you want to come on? I'm going to put Heather on to ask the question herself. Yeah. Can I do that?
Great.
Yeah. We're experimenting with the technology. We'll see how this goes. Okay. Yeah. Hi, Heather. How are you?
I'm fine. Hi. How are you? Thanks. Thanks, both of you. You spoke so well about getting involved in the social action, but if we go into so many different areas, our voices will get lost, and that's what I mean by diffuse.
Yeah.
And there's always this, strength in numbers, and I'm always fearful that we get lost somehow if we don't have the concentration for ourselves. So what do you recommend?
It's such a good question. And I alluded to it before, that there is so much work to do. Everyone is needed. And I think that each one of us has to, in some quiet time, ask ourselves the question, what's going to be my main or one or two areas, although, those of us who are overachievers, like most of us, like I'm going to have 5 main things. Pick what's the top thing that you really care about, or the top 2 things that you really care about, and how to find people who are with you on that and take action there. I think that we all can do one little thing a day. So, and we all don't have to do everything. Does that help at all, Heather?
Yes, it does. I find, I'm very involved in Democrats Abroad, which tends to go into the wide spectrum of issues, though. Yeah. But it does. I tend to get drawn into too many things, and that's one of the reasons why I asked the question.
Yeah. So I think it's really helpful to write something down. Like to say, not that you have to be committed to it forever, but for the month of December, the month of January, I'm going to focus my efforts in these two areas. That's, one thing. And I will sign all the petitions, but I'm only going to do posts about X, or I'm going to go to rallies.
Mm-hmm. All right, I want to thank you so much, Heather. And there's another question here that has been seconded. So
okay.
So I'm going to bring Russ on to ask it. He says about how does the strength of divine feminine step forward without getting crushed? Russ, would you?
Oh boy.
Hang on a second. I'm looking. Yeah, Russ. Yeah, I'm going to put you on here. Yeah. Okay. Does that work?
Oh, Barbie just wrote the name of the Facebook site.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Hi, Russ. Hi,
hello.
Cynthia.
I think I'm the only guy here.
It could be. I don't know. Okay. Welcome. Good to have you.
So that really begs the question of how does that feminine step forward? Cynthia was sitting next to me and said, she feels like the bullies are in charge.
Okay.
And so how do you step forward without becoming a bully yourself?
That's a great question.
What a beautiful question. Beautiful. I think, honestly, that even though the bully won, I deeply believe that this is a time where the divine feminine is emerging and has to be front and center. In fact, one theory on why he won is because that is becoming true, and that there is so much fear around, the people who voted for him, that for Trump, that looks like it won. I mean, it did in a way, except if you look at the popular vote, it didn't win. And I think that the divine feminine to me is represented by the heart and warmth and compassion and nurturing. And I think that we have to be really deeply committed to those qualities in our conversations, wherever they are, and to really honor that in each other and to lift people up who embody that. Those, I think, are the new leaders, in both men and women, who are going to lead us in this time.
I think we also need actual practical tools for emotional self-defense, emotional verbal self-defense.
Yeah.
There was that book from 30 years ago, Suzette Hegden. Oh my God, I'm forgetting her name. But the book, The Gentle Art of Verbal Self-Defense. And that was like a set of tools for how to respond to bullies verbally, like verbal, toxic, emotional bullies, without becoming that, from a place of compassion and balance and centering and knowing yourself and all of those things. And it seems to me that we really have to refresh that toolbox and gain tools for ourselves. Because
I pulled out from my bookshelf the book People of the Lie by Scott Peck the other day, because I feel like I need to refresh my own knowledge about how to deal with evil. I think that it is important to know it, to acknowledge it, and I think there's different ways of being in it. sometimes you have to move away from that evil. You have to, get out of the relationship, right? And I do think that there are other times, like in terms of Trump, we have to stand up. We have to resist. We have to do it with each other. We can't just move away. You can move away out of a toxic relationship. You're not going to move out of the country. So we have to learn how to be in active resistance to evil.
Yeah. Our time is up, and I can't believe it. And we only got through like half of my questions, and it was just the time.
Oh.
Right. So what I would like to say is a couple of things. So we have a few follow-ups. Somebody just wrote on, can we get a suggested reading list? That's a great idea. So
great idea.
Put together a reading list. We're in the process of putting together follow-up events, right? Where Letty Cotton-Pogrevin who's not on, but she signed up, is going to be an interviewee, and we have a couple of other people who've been really on the front lines of all this who we're going to be talking with and interviewing over the next month or two. So in the same time slot, even though this is recorded, so we're going to be uploading it as well. But we're going to start sharing resources either via Facebook or possibly by a Google group for sharing and continuing the conversation. And there were a couple of follow-ups from here. We already have somebody sent in the name of the Facebook group.
The Maccabees.
Facebook groups. Thank you, Betsy. It's the Jewish Community of Action, Jewish Community of Action Against Hate.
We'll send it out. And also, I know that Elana and I, we threw this together this week, and so I want to appreciate everyone who came into this conversation. We would love to get your feedback on what worked, what didn't work, and also, are you interested in having a private Facebook group to continue this conversation? I'm not saying that we're going to definitely do that, but we definitely will consider it. And so we're
or a Google group to do it by email.
Okay. Yes.
I'm just putting that out there as a possibility that I've used in the past. Definitely feedback. We want to hear feedback and further questions. And if there's a particular speaker that you want to hear, let me know also, and we'll see what we can arrange. And we'll send out also the other resources that we had mentioned before about maintaining your spiritual practice and building a toolbox for our new era. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day, and thank you for being here. And thank you so much, Jill.
You're welcome. Thank you, Elana. This was so great. Thank you.
Okay, take care, everyone.
Thank you to everyone.